Welcome to Detox Q&A, where all of your detox questions get answered to reclaim your energy, heal your gut, and leave brain fog behind. We're here to help you live a low-tox, high-vibe life that's easy on you and the planet, so you can be who you came here to be. I'm your host, Sinclair Kennally, certified toxicity and detox specialist, expert on detox for digestive disorders, and survivor of complex chronic illness. Episode 4. I've heard that fluoride is bad for you. Is this actually true? If so, how can I protect my family from it? Asked Sean Davis from California. So some of our listeners may already know that fluoride is not great for you and think that you're doing enough to protect yourself by not having a fluoridated toothpaste. And that is a good start, but it's not actually enough. So let's break this down. I want you all to understand how fluoride disrupts the body, why it matters so much to have a fluoride strategy, and what can actually be done about it since it's such a persistent little particle. So you may have heard about the studies that revealed fluoride's impact on our little ones in utero. Prenatal exposure to fluoride decreases IQ at a similar level to lead, which we take very seriously, right? And it also lowers your IQ when you're exposed to fluoride at any age for the long term. So I'll link to a couple of studies in the show notes, including a JAMA study, that's a Journal of American Medical Association, that's particularly damning. And, that does sound bad, and it is. Of course, we want to keep our IQ points, super important, but fluoride does so much more than that. It calcifies the pineal gland, for one. Why does that matter? Well, your pineal gland is just this little itty bitty gland in the size of a grain of rice right in the center of your brain. It's actually responsible for a lot of crucial jobs. And fluoride decreases the pineal gland's ability to produce melatonin because it calcifies over the surface of the pineal gland's. It's got like this crystalline structure that's very delicate on the outside of the pineal gland, and fluoride just gloms onto that for the long term. That's why we use the term calcifying your pineal gland, because it just locks on. And it's important to understand what melatonin actually does for the body. We think of it as just our hippie NyQuil that you can pick up over the counter, right? But it's a substance that your body makes on its own in your pineal gland for many crucial reasons. Melatonin helps regulate your circadian rhythms, which means it's helping to regulate your sleep and wake cycles, your appetite, and so much more. It's your brain's detergent. It's supposed to flush through your brain at night while you sleep to mobilize the toxins that have accumulated throughout the day in the brain and get them on the move into the rest of the body for excretion, protecting your brain. So crucial, right? It's also an amazing antioxidant. So think super repair agent and fountain of youth. And it's also a potent anti-cancer agent. So yes, we will take some more melatonin, please. That sounds wonderful. But the pineal gland makes melatonin, and when it's reduced in its ability to produce it, we have this cascade effect, right? So the pineal gland is also responsible for controlling hormone signals to all organs. And as it calcifies from fluoride, that distribution of those signals slows down. So it compromises sleep, fluoride does, further impacting your body's ability to regulate your weight and detox, which it wants to do while you're asleep, by the way. And it reduces the pineal gland's ability to translate nervous system signals into endocrine signals. So that further disrupts weight regulation. So many studies show this. This is not like edgy or up for debate, by the way. Like this is well proven and well understood in the scientific community. And pineal gland distress from fluoride is also linked to not just long-term IQ decrease, but gut dysbiosis, neurological disease, including but not limited to anxiety, depression, autism, dementia, and Parkinson's. But it's not just about pineal gland distress. We have to think beyond that to the rest of the body when it comes to fluoride, because it stores in your thyroid gland, which further distresses the thyroid gland and impacting your metabolism even more. So, and fluoride was actually used to be prescribed to slow down an overactive thyroid, which I find so interesting because it's so good at doing that. That's a great use for it. And fluoride competes with iodine uptake in the thyroid. So we can't be talking about iodine and how we're short, we're not getting enough because every cell in our body needs iodine, without also taking fluoride into account. Fluoride is also responsible for certain types of cystic acne, obviously thyroid conditions like hypothyroidism, dental fluorosis, which we'll talk about in a second, skeletal fluorosis, and it can be mistaken for arthritis and other conditions. So Yes, let's talk about sources. And obviously, we have it marketed to us in toothpaste. We've got so many. It's really weird when you go down the toothpaste aisle of a grocery store, isn't it? So you've got all these ones that say fluoride added. Yay, so important, buy this one. But we also have enough awareness of this issue now that right next to it is the same brand saying fluoride free. So they're trying to scoop up the market on both sides. But beyond that, it's in antibiotics, it's in anesthesia, in drugs like Prozac. In fact, many common drugs contain fluoride because it's so good at delivering the prescription to the cells. It's also in chicken products, in black tea more than green. It's just really important to consider where something was made because if produce was grown in a fluoridated area where you're actively adding fluoride to the water, or a beverage was bottled in a fluoridated area, you're just getting exposure to fluoride. Or if you ever showered in a fluoridated area or picked up a Starbucks, along the way, it's not just about where you live, it's about where everything you take in comes from. So beyond that, we want to think about extruded cereals, beer, of course, bottled beverages, we just mentioned, alkaline water. We're not a fan of that. We'll talk about that more in future episodes. It's also in pesticides, especially in high in monocropped areas. And monocropping is exactly how it sounds. One food crop is grown across a large area of land, usually a whole region, and there's no complementary crops to naturally regulate and reduce pests. There's no rotation to heal and replenish the soil. So they end up just adding more and more of these toxic chemicals to get the crops through the season. It's not great. And of course, fluoride is added to our tap water. In 70% of the US, we actively add it in. And that's not actually required in most states. The CDC just recommends it. But in most cases, that's decided at the local level. So you have more power than you realize. There's just a few states that require it statewide. Kentucky is one and a couple other. We'll link them in the show notes. And it's also important to understand the amount of fluoride that we're adding to the water and that is considered safe. So the US legal limit is 4 parts per million, which is far higher than many other countries, which limit it to just 1 part per million. And studies have shown that many bottled juices and wines test higher than 4 parts per million. They're like 6 parts per million or even higher, yet no action has been taken against these companies that we're aware of anyway at this time. I hope so. I hope that's coming because this really needs to be addressed. So fluoride is such a potent neurotoxin and it's so nasty. Why are we still adding it actively to our water? It really comes down to the industrial machine, so far as we can tell. Industrial economics and politics. Fluoride is an unwanted byproduct of aluminum processing, of many fertilizer productions, and from iron ore manufacturing. And it has to go somewhere. So much better to be able to actually sell your waste at a profit rather than trying to figure out where to store this toxic stuff, right? And some areas do have it naturally occurring in the water. And as some of this data was coming to light a few decades ago, it would have replaced tremendous financial burdens on areas tasked with removing it from their local water. And so they were part of suppressing this information. And one other factor that I found was really interesting is that Nixon had this major initiative to cure dental decay in a decade. And which is so fascinating because you never hear that about him. But the sugar lobby successfully refocused those efforts on adding fluoride to the water to supposedly strengthen teeth instead of scrutinizing our diets and the sugar lobby's practices. And while it does densify the surface of teeth when fluoride is topically applied, that doesn't actually make our teeth healthier in the long run. It makes them more prone to chipping and breakage later on. We work with several dentists actually who refer their patients to us, and they talk about how teeth become less resilient and more like marble that can be chipped away when exposed to fluoride over the long term. So we'll put a link in the show notes so you can check if your area is fluoridated too. And fluoride, it's important to understand it has long life in our body, like decades and decades. So you need an ongoing avoidance strategy, but you also need a removal strategy. So let's talk action steps. Avoidance strategy would include fluoride-free dental care, obviously, fluoride-free toothpaste, fluoride-free mouthwash. Make sure that your dentist isn't adding fluoride to your teeth treatments. Some dental offices are really on board and they understand this and they're all about educating their patients to get away from fluoride products. And some you'll still walk in and they'll try to upsell you with a fluoride treatment. It's nuts. It's really just blows my mind. You also want to consider your water source, right? So Michael's and my favorite source of water is distilled water. That's what we use for both drinking and cooking. And yes, people love reverse osmosis, and many filters claim to remove it. And reverse osmosis with an additional bone char filter will reduce the fluoride in your water, but will not remove it completely. So, depending on how sensitive you are and how willing you are to deal with this, it's a really good idea to actually just tackle this and not rely on your reverse osmosis filter, but to get distilled and start creating distilled water in your own home. It's actually very cost effective. So taking iodine internally will displace stored fluoride. That's a really important thing to understand because fluoride gets stored deep in our tissues, right? And our favorite is a fulvic iodine, which we'll link in the show notes. Oh, this is a great reminder to join our free podcast Facebook group, Detox to Thrive Podcast. That's the name of it. And that's where we'll share any additional tips that relate to our episodes and discounts that we're able to share for products mentioned in our episodes. Super fun. So come on down and join us there. Let's see what else. We talked about the reverse osmosis and bone char filter. So the Berkey filter is quite popular among our community, and I understand why. And they do add a fluoride filter add-on, but you really need to look at the fine print because if you're using that for a family, the fluoride filter will only last for a few weeks. And the fluoride filter is full of aluminum. So it's like, I just don't love this. And since it's only effective for a short time, it just stresses me out, and we cannot stand behind it or recommend it. I do want to talk about a couple of things that you can add to your food. One is tamarind paste. That's a healing food that helps the body recover from fluoride damage. Just a small amount worked into your diet a couple of times a week. Also, turmeric. Cooking with turmeric can protect your neurons from excitotoxicity, which is the pathological process by which neurons are damaged and killed by exposure to fluoride. So, upon contact with fluoride, those guys literally excite themselves to death, which we don't want that. We want to keep our neurons. So, get some recipes in your rotation that include turmeric, or if you're not a fan of cooking with it, you can use a high quality turmeric supplement. That's also an option. And we also really recommend using liposomal melatonin. So not just any melatonin will cross the blood-brain barrier. It's actually very difficult to get it to do that. So you want a liposomal melatonin. We'll talk about a couple other ways in future episodes to get melatonin in. But this can really help to get melatonin back into the brain where it will do its job of flushing out the stored toxins there. You want to start low and slow because you remember it's supposed to have been there this whole time, and we're all a little low on melatonin, sometimes extremely low. And once you get those toxins moving, you want to have the support in place to handle that. So just start low, like one pump a night under the tongue on the way to bed. It's great. So I also want to end with where you can take action because you have more power than you realize, especially since most of this is decided at the local level. And there's so much data to help back you up. Like literally, it's almost embarrassing. In fact, other countries think we're nuts for still doing this. Shocker. So you can take action by joining the Fluoride Action Network. You can check them out online, or Moms Against Fluoridation. They do a great job. And in many cases, the folks who saved a community from fluoride exposure were just a handful of passionate individuals, or even just one that got the conversation going and showed up every week to her local city council and got the conversation moving. So till next time, remember, it's never too late to heal. You and your body are brilliant, and we're in this together.